Take warning. You better take warning. Take warning. You better do good. Let your light shine bright. Let your light shine right. Respect your fellow man as you should. Take warning. You better take warning. Take warning. You better do good. Let your light shine bright. Let your light shine right. Respect your fellow man as you should. The evil that men do lives after them. The evil that men do lives after them. Your evil today will blight your tomorrow. So do good today and avoid your sorrow. Take warning. You better take warning. Take warning. You better do good. Let your light shine bright. Let your light shine right. Respect your fellow man as you should. Take warning. You better take warning. Take warning. You better do good. Let your light shine bright. Let your light shine right. Respect your fellow man as you should. The evil that men do lives after them. The evil that men do lives after them. Your evil today will blight your tomorrow. So do good today and avoid your sorrow.
Take the message, everybody.
Take one.
All right, a very pleasant good night. Let's just get ready to rock and roll. Like the song saying, take warning indeed. All of you, wherever you are, we just want to welcome you to Straight Up on 107.1 FM. And tonight we have no strangers. They're absolutely no strangers to you guys at all. We have Tom Anderson and we have Bart Fisher. Bart Fisher is a lawyer out there in Washington, D.C., has done a lot of things. He almost got the Nobel Peace Prize in 2019. On another occasion, we'll ask him what happened. But again, we have starting off with Thomas Anderson. He's the president at last, government watchdog, and also an independent journalist. Tom Anderson has an extensive history, professional history, working with every form of media, regardless of platform. He is there, and he has worked along for 15 years. Over 15 years, he has worked as a Washington, D.C. government watchdog at a think tank. And his research and collaboration and so forth hit the front pages of the New York Times, Washington Post, New York Post, etc. And Tom Anderson is certainly no stranger to all of you who are watching. Now let's go to the other guy, Bart Fisher. Many of you remember Mr. Fisher. He was with us regularly and during the elections, the 2020 elections. And as you know, as we go back, Guyana election battle matters to the U.S. Bart Fisher was able to break that down for us during the 2020 elections. He did a great job. Since then, he's been doing a lot of things. We know prior to that, he's been moving around with some big wigs, former Secretary of State and former presidential candidate of the U.S., Hillary Rodham Clinton. That's Bart Fisher and her right there. And then Senator Joe Manchin. Okay, Senator Joe Manchin in 2022. Just giving you guys a brief background as to our guest. And Bart Fisher is a lawyer in Washington, D.C. As I've said earlier, he attended Harvard Law School, and we all can find Harvard Law School. It's a pity We can't find some of the universities that we have heard, IFLAT and so forth. Um, and so a little bit of Mr. Fisher. He's the chairman of the Give Life Foundation. He's also a member of the board of directors of Plastic Anemia and MDS International Foundation, which he founded in 1983. We can go on and on about Mr. Fisher, on and on about Mr. Tom Anderson. In other words, they come highly recommended right here on 107.1 FM. Thank you all for sharing the link and continue to share the link. Let's get ready to introduce our guests this evening. Who's first? Mr. Fisher, good night and welcome back. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you? It's a pleasure to be back.
Good to have you back after a couple of years under the circumstances. Sanction is the main topic. Sanction indeed. We spoke about that back in 2020. Good to see you. Mr. Thomas Anderson, welcome back again. How have you been, sir?
Hey, Mark. Hey, been great. Great to be on with you, Bart. Great to be back on in front of the audience here, and hopefully have a good night with a discussion tonight on what's going on with these sanctions and everything.
Thank you so much. Let's get right into what's happening out there in the Caribbean right now. You see Russian warships enter Havana Harbor under Washington's watchful eye. Mr. Anderson, what's going on there, sir? Take the first bite.
Well, there's a lot, but this is something that when I've come on the show before, I've spoken about. Remember, I said just a few months ago when I was on the last time that Guyana doesn't have a system in place to know what's coming in and out of their country, even though there are a ton of natural resources leaving. And I said, and remember I was talking about it when there was the oil leak that hit Trinidad. So I was saying, they don't know what's coming out. And the sanctions that hit Mr. Muhammad, and just so the audience knows, they probably already know, but the U.S. Treasury Department put sanctions through the Global Magnitsky Act on the Azradine and Muhammad enterprise there in Guyana, along with their gold trading business and also their car racing business. They put the sanctions on them because apparently they had about 11 tons of gold or 10,000 kilos of gold left. Guyana said that they paid off government to be able to hide what was leaving the country. That turned out to be about $50 million US dollars worth of tariffs and taxes that they did not pay the Guyana government. And so they also hit May Thomas with sanctions as well. And these sanctions, the way they work, just so your audience knows, and on behalf of the Mohammeds, and stop this. This is something the President of the United States signs it. It's an executive action. The courts cannot review it. Once you're sanctioned, and you don't come off until they release you off. That's a big deal, considering that Exxon is in country and they can't do any business with anyone on the sanctions list. So this essentially shuts down the Mohammed business, and it's because of the gold smuggling that's happening. Apparently, the American government saying is happening, and it's a huge amount, 10, 11 tons of gold. That's a lot, man. It's a lot of gold. It's a lot of money, and it's happening as the Russian ships are coming in, and they're potentially going to create a problem potentially in this area because you have Russian ships maybe visiting Venezuela. You have a Maduro who is desperate. Does he create a situation here? These are very interesting times. And I believe these sanctions are linked to these Russian maneuvers, in my opinion.
All right, Tom Anderson giving you his opinion to open the batting, as we would say. We go straight to Mr. Bart Fisher. Good night. Bart, before we get straight into the sanctions, have you seen this? And what is your take on these Russian warships entering Havana Harbor under Washington's watchful eye?
I think the Russians are sending a message related to U.S. activities in Ukraine, and the message is back off and don't support Zelensky, and Ukraine. Russia regards Ukraine as part of itself, its country, and the invasion has been opposed, of course, by the Biden administration, and now has new funds injected into the war. So this is the new axis of evil that the U.S. is now facing, including Russia and Iran, North Korea. And so I think Putin is sending a signal himself that I don't really care what you think or are doing, but I'm going to send vessels near Cuba. Now, Cuba is a hot button. We go back to the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. The idea that this nuclear-powered vessel, although it's not carrying nuclear weapons, apparently, according to Jake Sullivan, our national security advisor, nevertheless, the fact that a nuclear-powered vessel is approaching Cuba brings back these memories of the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, where we were at the edge of war with Russia, well then Soviet Union. So at the end of the day, I think it's serious, and you need to look at world events through the eyes of the leaders. Looking through Putin's eyes, he's sending a signal. That's what I think is going on. If he goes to Venezuela, that's another signal. So I agree with Tom that it's a serious issue. It needs to be watched.
Serious issue needs to be watched. The other thing we're going to go at, Tom hinted at that earlier, the Office of Foreign Assets Control. They have done something there in Guyana with regards to sanctions of individuals there, including one government official. One government official has been sanctioned. We haven't heard from the head of the government there. There was no press conference or nothing at all. And those individuals who have been sanctioned are the senior Mohammed and the son Azruddin, along with a government official who's a former permanent secretary of the Ministry of Home Affairs. She's now the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Labor. Now, let's get straight into the sanction itself. Can you start off with, Mr. Fisher? Can you explain to our audience how they go about in terms of the sanction? As we see here, the following individuals, they have been added to OFAC's SDN's list. Talk a little bit about us and how do people and countries get on this list?
The list you're talking about is called the Specially Designated Nationals List, SDN list. And the impact of that is that properties they hold, those individuals named, are blocked in the United States. In other words, if the Mohammeds have money in U.S. bank accounts, they're frozen, they're blocked. Doesn't mean they're expropriated or taken away, but it means that they don't have access to them as long as the sanctions are in place. So I tell people in general, it's pretty hard to get on the sanctions list, and it's nearly impossible to get off. It's a really, as you see, the investigation went on here for a long time. And it's a serious matter. It's a criminal statute. And it has secondary sanction impact. So like you mentioned, Tom mentioned, Exxon will have a problem now if it wants to deal with these guys. So this is not this is an agency, just want to emphasize, it's called OFAC, Office of Foreign Assets Control. It sits within the U.S. Department of the Treasury. This is not a new statute. This idea has gone back to the War of 1812, in fact, when the sanctions were imposed against the British. The War of 1812. It's this old idea that the U.S. can sanction parties, foreign countries. In this case, it's not a country, it's individuals and corporations. And that's an important distinction because but it does implicate the government. It implicates the government of Guyana deeply to have a woman or an official of that level accused of bribery, that's a very serious thing. So while it's not the country as a whole that's sanctioned, and obviously because of the oil reserves and potential, we don't want to sanction the country, but we want to send a message. And obviously, the gold sector, it's an important sector of the economy. So to have, I agree with Tom's point, the idea that commodities can roll in and out without the supervision that's really important, it's a big problem. It's a big issue. And corruption, of course, is a big issue. They stated corruption as the basis, OFAC as the basis for the sanctions. And so that's not a good thing. That doesn't send a good message, a positive message for potential U.S. investors. So I think it's a serious signal by the U.S. that it's not going to tolerate corruption. It's not going to tolerate smuggling in and out of gold of Guyana. And it's a serious matter.
Serious matter indeed. If you've just joined us, we have Bart Fisher, an attorney in Washington, D.C., and we have Tom Anderson from the last watchdog. They are with us. Tom, your take on this sanction and how serious it is for not just the persons named, Nazar Mohammed, Azruddin Mohammed, and the May Tuzen, that's the government official. How serious it is not only for them, but for the country.
Well, yeah, like Bart was saying, I mean, Bart really laid it out well, man. It's super hard to get on there because, well, in order to get on the sanctions list, you have to have the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Secretary of the Treasury, and the White House, the president. All of them have to be in line. All have to agree to put you on there. And if it's an individual, just imagine you've got the president of the United States and all of these high level officials discussing your name as a person. I mean, that should let you know this is serious, beyond serious, right? And so it's really hard to get on there because there are very few individuals in this world who are to a level where you have the president of the United States and all these high level cabinet officials speaking about them to lock up all of their assets. Like, it's just really hard to get in that spot. So when you are in that spot and you do get sanctioned, I mean, you become a pariah no matter where you go, because if any U.S. company is caught doing business with you, they end up getting hit with sanctions. Now they don't get their assets frozen like the individual, but they get hit with fines, and it becomes a serious matter. It's just a huge problem. So for this to happen to the Mohammeds, it's what it's saying is that going forward, Guyana as a nation is moving up from a backwater country, basically, that no one cared about, to now a nation that everyone cares about. And since everyone is caring about it now, people like the Mohammeds, according to our government, they are no longer welcome as far as their business and whatever it is they're doing. And according to our government, what they're doing is they're corrupting the Guyanese government in a huge way, right? And so when you think about what's happening in the region, when you think about what's happening in the world today, when you think about the ramifications of the oil coming out of this area, not only the Guyanese oil, but the Venezuelan oil on the world market, and with the war in Ukraine, with all these tensions going on, for this to be occurring in the middle of it means that whatever this operation was that the Mohammeds were overseeing and whatever corruption they were involved in, it was so serious that it was creating an international incident that we had to put a stop to, is how I see it.
Let's head back. Thank you so much, Tom. Let's head back to Bart and ask this question. How long does it take to get on that list? Because common sense, as I'd want to use here on this particular topic, is that you just cannot get on the list within 1 day or 2 days. Talk to us, please, about the process and how long it takes.
Well, in this case, it was an investigation going from 2019 through 2023, well, to the moment, actually. And so it's at least a 4-year investigation. The other part is how long you're on the list, how do you get off? And that's the bookend question. And there is a process and a procedure to get off the list, which involves filing a petition at the Office of Foreign Assets Control. And in the petition, the person who or company placed on the list has to give the rationale as to why they shouldn't be on the list. The typical reasons given are change in circumstance or change in conditions, where the party says, look, that was long ago and now I'm clean. And it's a different situation. And sometimes it takes a lot of imagination to say you want to believe them. But sometimes circumstances do change and people do clean up their act and should be given a chance. So there is the number one petition is the petition to be removed from the specially designated nationals list. The second petition is called an unblocking petition. You would file that also with OFAC and try to state the reasons why your assets shouldn't be blocked. And I might say that gold is watched. The gold market is watched very carefully. And recently in Africa, for example, operators in the gold area in Zimbabwe were sanctioned. Parallel kind of case. So this is not just U.S. picking on Guyana. This is watched in Africa and around the world. So how long? It could be a very long time. They could, you can't predict, but it could be years and years. And so it's incumbent on them to demonstrate to OFAC that they've cleaned up their act before they could get off the list. That's the short answer.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bart Fisher, attorney at law. We head back to the last watchdog president, Tom Anderson. Mr. Anderson, nobody's going to be placed on this list through hearsay or circumstantial evidence at all. The evidence has to be strong. And as Bart indicated, this investigation is not an overnight investigation, because the Mohammeds or one of them might have political intentions or whatever, and therefore they just got sanctioned because of that. This was an investigation that was going on since 2019. Obviously, they had to have strong evidence to put these folks on this list. Tom?
Well, I mean, they if you look at the rationale given out by OFAC, what was it? 11,000 kilos, 10,000 kilos of gold that we apparently have proven was smuggled out of the country that we caught there. And that's the thing. We know of 10,000 kilos, but there might have been double that. Right. And then we have it appears we have the evidence to show that, the Mohammeds were bribing government officials throughout the entire sector that deals with gold and what's coming in and out of the country. And so it's a situation where you have to ask yourself, and when you think about the evidence, where did we track some of this gold that was smuggled? Where is it going? Right. And is it a thing where Guyanese officials are being bribed, but then this gold being smuggled out is going out to maybe bribe other officials, maybe in the EU or somewhere else? You see, it becomes a thing where, from what I can tell, we have really tracked this down, and it looks like whatever it is starting off in Guyana and going out through the Mohammeds, it's making a huge impact on the international scene. I mean, that's the only way I can sort of read this as I'm reading it. Something really bad has been cooking here, and the evidence seems overwhelming, actually. So yeah, and especially to put a government official on like we have. Whew, I mean, this is I think the evidence is probably overwhelming, and it's going to be really hard for the Mohammeds to get off. But they would have to totally turn from whatever it is they're doing. And the problem with that is, and like I told you before I came on the show, Mark, if they're bribing officials, then they've got the receipts on officials in government, right? And so they know who's corrupt and who isn't. They know they have the evidence of it. And so now you have a situation where the Mohammeds politically are a hot potato for the PPP and for whoever else has ever been bribed. Like, how do you go forward with these guys there? And they know they have the receipts for the bribery, apparently, right? And so this becomes very complicated because apparently with these sanctions, what we're saying is yeah, the Mohammeds have been using the evidence they have of bribing officials against the officials. And that's what, if you look at the Global Magnitsky Act and how it was expanded over the years and how President Trump in 2017 expanded, it looks like this is where this is hitting under that authorization. There's a lot of talk in there about, like Cuban intelligence in the region, in the Caribbean and South America, and talk about Venezuela in that executive order with Trump in 2017, and basically the U.S. military being involved in these regions and making sure that things like political corruption aren't getting out of control, human rights violations. It was a big expansion in 2017 by Trump. So it looks like whatever evidence they have, this is related to a geopolitical thing. There's a lot of corruption involved, and it's ongoing. So I don't know how this shakes out, but to me, this seems like a very unstable time within the government of Guyana. There's going to be a lot of people in the PPP sweating bullets right now. This is difficult. I don't know how this is going to work, and especially with the Russian ships coming maybe to town in the area, to Venezuela. Man, these are hard times right now, in my opinion, man.
Hard times indeed. 30 minutes after 9 o'clock, get back to Mr. Fisher. You being the lawyer for all those years, over decades, you're a lawyer out there in Washington, D.C. You've dealt in international trade, international relations, and so forth. All of these agencies, Bart, we've had the Homeland Security Investigations of New York, Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, Strike Force, Diplomatic Security Service, Customs and Border Protection, Office of Intelligence. You got the New York Operations and the Federal Bureau of Investigations, Miami Field Office. All these agencies, Bart, all these agencies, evidence upon evidence upon evidence against the Mohammeds?
Yes, I agree with Tom. With a number of agencies, it appears to be a very thorough investigation. The question would be, and the implications are large for the current government. I don't see how May Thomas can stay in office. She's permanent secretary of the Ministry of Labor. I mean, how does that work? So I think the government's going to have to do some house cleaning, and maybe not just with her. At the time, she was Minister of Home Affairs during the bulk of this investigation.
Permanent secretary at the Ministry of Home Affairs. Sorry, Bart, but go ahead. Yep.
Yes, you're right. So how does she continue in office is the issue. And how credible is the government's commitment to integrity and to regulating and controlling the gold trade? So I can tell you the exact same issue exists in Zimbabwe and in other countries in Africa where gold seems to, well, a lot of it is what we call artisanal mining, as you know, and the small entities end up getting the gold out of the country and go to the Emirates, go to other places. And it needs, I think, as a global industry, needs considerably more watchdogs like Tom, people who will monitor all this. Guyana really has such tremendous potential economically. It'd be a shame to let this sanctions issue interfere with that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, dear Mr. Fisher. Get back to Mr. Anderson. Not so long ago, a few months back, the Mohammeds claimed that they hired an ex-FBI agent. They hired some lobby firm out there in Washington to say that they're clear. There's nothing at all on them, and people are wrong to accuse them. They're innocent. What is your take on all of that the Mohammeds did?
Well, I mean, well, here's the, so you have a situation with Guyana that's really interesting and unique, right? Because they're sitting on, and what's happening in South America right now, for example, you don't hear much in the news about the Colombian cocaine cartels anymore, right? They still exist. They just don't get their hands dirty with the cocaine stuff, like they're really into gold smuggling. Why? Because in the same areas where you can grow the coca plants, you can also get gold out of there, right? And so what's been happening down in other parts of South America is a boatload of illegal gold mining is happening all over the place. And when these people are illegally mining for gold and they have to get it out of country and out into the Emirates and other places, Guyana tends to be a good place to get it out of. Is one of the places. There are other places, but Guyana is one of the places. And so when you're having an issue with gold in Guyana, what you're also having an issue with is the gold being smuggled out of other places in South America, right? And so that becomes a geopolitical issue because the same people who want to smuggle gold out want to smuggle stuff like guns in, right? They also smuggle humans and drugs. I mean, if you're going to smuggle gold, why not smuggle everything else? And so that's where this really hits hard with Guyana, is all of the other types of black market industries that sort of hang on to the gold that's being smuggled out. They sort of ride the coattails of the gold, right? And so that's where these guys, that's why you see all these agencies involved, right? The organized crime drug enforcement task force out of New York. All of that stuff is happening because the drugs, the human trafficking, all of that gets attached to this gold smuggling. Got a bunch of stuff coming in. And so that's why this is going to be a tangled mess, because of all this extra stuff that always happens with the gold. And so that's where going forward, when you really, like I said before to you, Mark, I think what has to happen, I've said this over and over again about Guyana, the basic rule of law has to be set on things like what's coming in and out of your country. Like no matter who's in charge, whether it's the PPP or anyone else, the government has to get a grasp on basic infrastructure stuff, like what's coming in and out. That's key. That's huge. And going forward, if that's not done, these types of problems are only going to get worse because, yeah, you put sanctions on the Muhammad operation, but guess what? Someone else will pop up and take the place if the government itself doesn't start to get control over what's coming in and out of their country.
Thank you so much, Tom Anderson there. Hey, guys, I'm glad that you've tuned in. Thank you for sharing the link as well. We head back to Mr. Bart Fisher, the attorney at law here. Mr. Fisher, concerning the lone government official that has been sanctioned, and I'm sure she took orders from senior individuals. And I'm also certain that the U.S. law enforcement agencies may very well have evidence of such. Are you surprised that she's the lone government official that has thus far been sanctioned?
Yes, and I would like to know more about the bribes that she allegedly took. How much money? How did she take? Gifts were mentioned. I'd like to see more specificity as to exactly what she received and what other people knew about it, and whether it was reported internally and nothing done about it. So in my view, this is the tip of the iceberg, as Tom indicates, that there's a lot more we need to know about it. But I'd also note that the implications are serious for financial institutions that want to deal with Guyana also, and these people. Banks are very wary of any place that has sanctions. Financial institutions have faced massive fines for dealing with people on the specially designated nationals list. And so, although Guyana has oil, it's going to still want to have good relations with banks and financial institutions. So this is a very serious matter. Although the country itself isn't sanctioned, it's now going to be under a microscope. And we say in the banks, there's always a business development guy who wants business to come in the bank, but there's always a compliance officer. We call him Dr. No, or her, whoever that is. So the Dr. No's, and all these banks are going to be very wary now of dealing with Guyana, and they're going to be very careful. So it would behoove the country to clean up its act on gold, make sure it totally monitors the gold that's going in and out. And otherwise, it doesn't send a good message to investors, certainly to the banks. So overall, everybody has to now demonstrate that there's a change in circumstance. They've cleaned up their act. And also, there needs to be a full-scale government investigation as to what's been going on, or maybe an independent. In the U.S., we have special prosecutors. I don't know how you would do it in Guyana, or who would look into it locally. Bear in mind, these are U.S. sanctions. But the local country that's affected has to also take action to clean up its act.
Lots of them have to clean up their acts. People wouldn't be confident at all of having any investigations done by the government of Guyana. It's got to be an international agency or agencies to investigate. People want to know exactly what sort of bribe, and certainly that government official is not the only one. Tom, we are hearing about visa revocations, and this is something that we've been hearing a while. Some government officials may have been slapped with visa revocations, along with some senior police officers and some other businessmen. Are you at all surprised that that's the case?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised by that, but I think I think Bart's right. I think there's actually
Not sure what's happening there at Tom said. Tom, go ahead, please.
sorry. So Guyana doesn't have the resources that we have, but they can piggyback them domestically to go in and start cleaning up their problems, right? And so it's one step at a time, but they have an opportunity now to take a good step in a positive direction on the gold, right? On the corruption, bribing of officials, right? Where they can go in and ask for our help. We have loads and loads of investigative material that they can plug into, right? And so this is really a chance for Guyana to step forward into the world of, modern finance, modern banking. This is what's necessary, and this is good. This was going to happen regardless. Just so everyone knows, the audience understands, these types of things are going to happen because Guyana is transitioning from a country that could have gone in a certain direction, but instead is choosing to go in a direction that we're talking now. And what that means is some things are going to look a little messy, but they have the opportunity to take the right steps now and to correct what's going on. I continue to say Guyana has a bright future. This may seem like a dark time, but it's actually a good time for the country to pivot and move in a really good direction to deal with some of the things that they were going to have to deal with regardless, and coming out and being a major player on the geopolitical scene and in the world, in my opinion.
All right, we get back to Mr. Bart Fisher June, sometime around this time of 2020, in the Washington Examiner. The headline there was Guyana election battle matters to the U.S. Guyana elections battle matters to the U.S. In that article, Mr. Fisher, this is, and I quote, during the People's Progressive Party tenure, the government had an anti-American, pro-Chinese point of view. The country became a narco state with serious narcotics trafficking problems and rampant corruption. Portions of the government were, in essence, a criminal enterprise. Bart, changes? Have you seen any changes?
Well, I say sometimes in life you should be careful that you get what you wish for. In 2015, Pompeo, Secretary of State, and the administration wanted a regime change. It's pretty clear. And they got it. And so this now, I agree with Tom, this presents an opportunity, for the PPP and the government to clean up its act so it can go forward. They have the resources, the natural resources and material resources in the country to go forward in a very positive way. So I'm not going to say it's a criminal enterprise, far from it, but you have maybe some bad apples, and you got to figure out who should be find them and then go forward in a straight and narrow direction. The U.S. has now, I mean, it's a great opportunity. I agree with Tom. It's a great opportunity for Guyana. The fulcrum of the world oil market could switch to Suriname and Guyana, that oil basin. All of a sudden, we might lessen our dependence in America on Saudi Arabia. And this is a very big geopolitical game that can be affected by corruption. And it's not in the current government's interest to have any stain or stench of corruption, because it has a great opportunity to develop the relationship. And in the U.S., who knows what happens in November when Trump comes in and we get the Pompeos back, and maybe they'll like this group more. They did like them in 2015 and 2020. So I don't want to say it's a blanket problem, but I want to say it's an issue they have to deal with.
An issue they have to deal with indeed. Tom, nothing from the regime at all. Absolutely nothing. Not a press conference. Everyone is silent in Guyana, other than some frivolous little 2 paragraphs of a so-called press release. That's it. Mr. Irfanali is silent. Barrett Jagdev is silent. Are you surprised, Tom?
Well, it's hard for them. I mean, so I see it here in the U.S. Here, I mean, you see it in every nation. But like, I'll give you an example in the U.S. You know, if let's say you have a corrupt police department, right, and you have a low-level police officer doing his job, and he's not a bad person, and he wants to do a good job. But if his supervisor's corrupt, and the supervisor tells him, hey, to do something that isn't right, if he says no, maybe the next time they kick a door down to go in to deal with an armed suspect, his backup doesn't come behind him, and this officer is shot and doesn't make it home that night. You see? And so what happens with corruption, unfortunately, is a lot of people get pulled into the dragnet of corruption that really aren't bad people, but they don't have a choice because the way the infrastructure is designed, there's no support for a low-level person to be a whistleblower, or for a low-level person to tell a high-level individual no to something that's that's related to corruption, because they don't want to lose their life. And in Guyana, that can happen. You can lose your life saying no to someone high-level and powerful that's corrupt, right? And so that's why that's why I say there's an opportunity here. It's easy to say that everyone in Guyana is corrupt in the PPP, that they're all corrupt. It's easy to say that, but you have to really understand that no matter what happens, no matter who's in power, the Guyana as a nation has been, over the years, basically a corrupt state. The system itself has been corrupt. And so in order to change that, you have to have some type of ability or way or system to weed out the really bad actors who need to go. And you have to be able to support the ones who aren't the bad actors. Now, I'm not saying that you can only support the people who have never done.
Seem to have some technical problems
Smart
over Tom. But sorry, Tom. Yeah, but thank you
so
much.
I just think something smart. I think, yeah. I just think smart moves have to happen, and they have to be really, with our help, it's possible to really go after the bad apples and not have to just clear out everybody, I think. And I think that's it, you have to be smart about, but that's what has to happen here, in my opinion.
Yep. Lots of bad apples we're seeing right now. Lots and lots of bad apples. We head back to Mr. Fisher. You said earlier that, of course, a regime change and the participation of such folks like the then U.S. Secretary of State, Mr. Pompeo, and others were forceful on a regime change there in Guyana. After the COMT, and I recall interviewing you 4 years ago on this matter, the recon process showed that the then government, the coalition government, won a second term by about 60,000 plus votes. After the recount, that never became reality because, as you mentioned, and we all know, regime change. But my question is, do you think that those guys who forced a regime change in Guyana are having regrets now, looking at the headaches that this current regime is giving, not only Guyana, but the world?
Well, I can't speak for them. they'll have to address the views they had then versus the views they have now. But there may be buyer's remorse. But the fact is, our focus has to be on how we clean this thing up, and do it in a way that protects U.S. national interests. The U.S. national interest here is huge. On the oil, it's very interesting. If you take the big picture in the U.S. foreign policy, we have consistently tried to pivot to Asia and get away from the morass of wars in the Middle East. And every time we try to get out of the Middle East, we get sucked back in. But now you have the Israeli situation, and of course you have Ukraine, and it's not in the U.S. national interest to be mired in these wars in the Middle East. And the large reason we are is oil and the natural resource, and OPEC. OPEC with a stranglehold on the price levels of oil. Well, we'd love to deal with Guyana and Suriname. Suriname has got exciting new discoveries, obviously. So this is in our hemisphere. This is in our backyard. It's in our interest to deal with in the Western Hemisphere. So I really am hopeful that they do clean their act up. It's in their interest to do it, but it's also in the U.S. national interest to have a reliable supplier. And of course, we have companies down there like Exxon that, are U.S. companies. So that's good. Yeah, we want to have reliable partners in this hemisphere. So regardless of which party is in power, I mean, the U.S. will deal with who's in power.
50 minutes after 9 o'clock, Bart Fisher there for you guys, attorney at law out in Washington, D.C. But guess what? We lost Mr. Anderson. Let's hope we get him back shortly as we prepare to wind down on tonight's program with our guests, Tom Anderson and Bart Fisher. Having looked at the political situation in Guyana, Mr. Fisher, lots of Guyanese are not seeing any hope. Billions and billions of dollars wasted, corruption rampant. With this sanction here, do you think that those who impose the sanctions stop short of an overall sanction of the entire government because of corruption and bribery and all these different things, not only in the government, but the judiciary, the police force, and so forth? Do you think they stop short of an overall sanction because of Exxon and maybe Hess and so forth in the country?
Well, that's a great question. To come back to Tom's earlier answer, it's an interagency process. OFAC does not operate in a vacuum. OFAC will do the investigation, but OFAC will take its policy guidance from the White House, National Security Council, State Department, Justice Department, Homeland Security. So it becomes an interagency effort on enforcing sanctions and finding sanctions. So obviously it's a big deal. And once you find the sanctions, you announce them. So I think it's a major event that the government down there has to deal with and has to make every effort to clean up, as I said before, clean up its act and indicate that they now have control, that there's been a change in circumstances, that they deserve, that these particular players deserve a chance again. That's a process. I said it involves filing petitions, also lobbying, and the people in Congress and on the Hill will make their voices known on this. And be interesting to see where people like Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader in the House, come out on an issue like this. And I'm sure they're being approached. So as lobbying will be, the political, aspects are important here too. But welcome to the world of OFAC sanctions. It's we used to call it the black box. You'd send a petition in and you wouldn't hear anything for years. And you wouldn't know. As an outside petitioner, you wouldn't know. But my legal advice to the sanctioned parties here would be to, get counsel, file petitions, indicate there's a change. They've cleaned up their act. And from the government side, I think the government has to indicate it's recognized it's acted against the wrongdoers if there's more than just Ms. Thomas.
Certainly, people are not going to keep their hopes up high that the current government would act in terms of go after the perpetrators at all, because some people in the audience may agree that going after the perpetrators might very well be going after themselves too. This question, as these folks who are sanctioned now, what's the likelihood of indictments against these individuals? You're the lawyer.
Well, as I say, I would like to see more evidence than what was in the Treasury announcement and State Department announcement and Voice of America announcement. I'd like to see the specifics, the basis or bases on which these sanctions were imposed. As I said before, it's not an easy thing to get on the specially designated nationals list. That's not where you want to be, that whether there's indictments in Guyana or the United States, I don't know. I'd like to see the evidence. I haven't seen enough evidence. But apparently, Exxon was warned about this in 2022 and ended up not doing business with the Mohammeds. So it has an impact. Just the fact of the investigations already had an impact on their enterprises. But going forward, there may be indictments. I don't know what the situation in Guyana is. In the U.S., would depend on evidence that I haven't seen, so I can't comment on that.
We have Mr.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Those things happen. So we were talking about the possibility of indictments of these individuals. Tom?
Yeah, well, I mean, usually that's a totally different kettle of fish right there, man. So, I mean, the sanction, with what's going on, I think that's where we're at. The problem with indictments is you have jurisdictional issues, you've got investigational issues, there's all types of stuff there. And on top of that, you're talking about gold. That's something that's rare, and government corruption. I mean, stuff like a drug cartel. I can see an indictment from a drug cartel, a leader of a drug cartel, but gold smuggling and bribing government officials. It's usually just sanctions, man. I doubt it's going to go to the point of that. I think what we want to see is the government in Guyana to do something here. I think that's what needs to happen more than anything else, more than any kind of indictments coming out of us, in my opinion.
Certainly. Thank you so much. We're hearing about terrorism. We're hearing about assassinations. We're hearing about drug dealings and all these different things. So quite possibly there may very well be some indictments. Who knows? But let's go as we prepare to wrap up. Mr. Fisher, in Guyana, we have something that's saying outside of Guyana to karma. During the 2020 elections, all these folks were describing people as sanctimonious gangsters and sanction and sanction and sanction. You're not surprised that these very people who were calling for sanctions are now themselves being sanctioned?
Well, this is their. They've had their chance. Let me put it that way. They had their chance at governance. That's what the campaign was about, 2020, and they won. And of course, we've had Trump contest the last election here, and so those battles become very bitter to this day in the U.S. So it was not accepted verdict. You're right on the claim of 60,000 votes. Really, the APNU plus AFC coalition should have won, but we've had a redux of that in the U.S. now, with Trump saying the votes were manipulated, and so it becomes very political, very partisan, very difficult. So, am I surprised? The answer is no. I'm really not surprised. But they just have to do a better job to deserve re-election.
Better job indeed. Elections around the corner, lots and lots of hot red buttons, so to speak. But Tom, as we prepare to wrap up here, this obviously is not looking good for the government, so to speak. Not good at all for them. Your closing remarks, please, sir.
Yeah, I tend to, for me, I don't like to take a side, not here in the United States politically, not abroad. I feel like when it comes to political parties, I love the fact that they battle each other politically. I think it's bad when they go outside of the world of politics and get into character assassination, or they get into illegality or illegal type things, corruption, other things. I think as long as the politics stay politics, everything's fine. I'm good with it. It doesn't matter what you believe politically, in my opinion, as long as it's still political and as long as it's within the rule of law. And so I still, I don't like to call into question elections. I don't, even if they were shady. I like to stick to whatever the best a country can do, even if it doesn't look like it's all that well. Do the best you can, try to make it better next time round. I think with all of that said, Guyana is in a great position, regardless of who's in power. It's not that I'm supporting the opposition or I'm supporting the PPP. It's not like that. The way I see it is Guyana has a chance to have a future that's better than the one that they're having now. And whoever's on board for that going forward, whether they're in the PPP or the opposition party, fine. Like anyone else who wants to hold the country back, wants to continue with the corruption, those are the people that need to go. And it doesn't matter what party they're in, right? And I think that's the key. And I think that's what everyone in Guyana needs to focus in on, is not really about party and who's in power and who isn't as far as party goes, but who are the true leaders in the country, and are they truly doing what's right for the people regardless of party? Because what's happening that I can tell is sometimes the opposition is given sort of a pass in Guyana, where they don't really have to hold up politically or organizationally in the way that they should, because the PPP is too corrupt. I think there sometimes there's an excuse being made here. So I feel like the opposition should be wholly 100% in on trying to make the country better. I think they should have the exact same focus that the PPP should have, and that's right now rooting out corruption, installing systems, government systems that deal with corruption and that deal with the basic function of government, so that at least no matter who's in power, the government is functioning properly for the people of Guyana. So that way international bank in, so that way other countries like the United States can help. We can't help. The banking can't come in if there isn't the proper infrastructure. And that's what the people of Guyana need to focus in on, regardless of party, in my opinion.
Thank you so much, Tom Anderson. Almost 2 decades experience as a watchdog out in Washington, D.C. He continues that in his private capacity. We really appreciate your input right here on 107.1 FM. Bart Fisher, your closing remarks as Guyanese are watching and waiting for more information to see what's going to happen, who else is going to be sanctioned, whose visas will be revoked, because that's the going thing in Guyana. Apart from hearing some ministers have already had their visas revoked, some senior police officers, businessmen, and so forth. Many of those folks are being pulled in for fitness at the airports, questioning. Your closing remarks, please, on the sanction, and maybe if you have a crystal ball in your hand.
Well, I want to echo Tom's comments. I agree with what he said completely, that this is a chance now for Guyana to clean house, make sure that the bad apples are taken care of and rooted out. And this is a great opportunity now for Guyana to show that it's worthy of being a steward for the oil resources, which are huge and of huge importance to the United States. And I hope they do. So it's in the U.S. national interest to have a strong government here in Guyana that can be lawful and get rid of corruption. I'm not totally in favor of the U.S. imposing its values around the world, as they've tried to do in Uganda and some other areas that are controversial. To me, this is not controversial. Corruption is a bad thing. And so the U.S. particularly does affect the U.S. Because the stability of this area, the Guyana, Suriname area, is important to the U.S. national security, not to mention the Venezuela. If that vessel goes to Venezuela, who knows where these threads come together. And then Venezuela has arbitration going with Guyana on who owns the oil. And it goes on and on. There's a lot of threads here that could unravel in a nasty way. I hope they don't.
Lots of things could unravel in a very nasty way. Attorney at law Bart Fisher with us, has been with us for quite a while. Last elections, many of you remember him. Some of you have been asking for him. Well, he's back with us this evening, and maybe he will be back with us in the very near future. Bart, thank you so much. I still owe you that Banks beer, please.
I want to collect in Guyana.
In Guyana. Tom Anderson, I also owe you that Banks beer too. Thanks again, Tom, for sparing us about an hour or so right here on 107.1.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Have a great night.
Appreciate it. And of course, all of you who are watching, whether you are in Guyana, outside of Guyana, wherever you are, we're always thankful and grateful for your presence right here on 107.1 FM. Lots of things happening, and that's why we bring individuals like Bart and Tom to talk to you guys, explain some things, break some things down a little bit, and we do hope that that's exactly what was done this evening. Tomorrow we will be back, and lots of things. We have some information that the possibility, mind you, of other names being mentioned and visas being revoked. We are not certain, though. We are not certain whether the Director of Public Prosecution, whether her name has been mentioned in any report, whether her visa was revoked, whether her husband's visa was revoked. Her husband is the head of the ERC, the Ethnic Relations Commission. We're not saying that their visas have been revoked. They have to say whether their visas were revoked. We're not saying that their names were mentioned in this sanction and the investigations done by all of those law enforcement agencies here in the U.S. I say that because CIOG is also the Mohammeds are members, said to be members of the CIOG, which is the Central Islamic Organization of Guyana. And I do believe that the last report, the Elder Mohammed has a senior spot there at CIOG. Lots of things. Some members of the judiciary, some magistrates' names have been mentioned, I believe, mind you. Some judges' names have been mentioned, senior police officers, and even many, many officials of the PPP regime. We are definitely not going to rule out the names such as Irfan Ali. We know Irfan Ali and the Mohammeds are very good friends. We are also hearing information or allegations that vehicles were given to Mohammed Irfan Ali by the Mohammeds, according to information, mind you. Lots and lots of things. And again, I say that the then permanent secretary of the Ministry of Home Affairs, May Toussaint, could not have done all of those things that is being alleged, mind you. She could not have done all of those things without the blessings of higher-ups of the PPP regime, and possibly right at the desk of Irfan Ali and Bart Jagdeo. We need answers. We need an investigation, and heads have to roll. And when I say heads have to roll, I mean politically speaking, mind you, because speaking of heads and so forth, Bart Jagdeo, they get very nervous. And that is why I just want to make myself very, very clear. When I say heads have to roll, politically speaking, they have to be removed. They have to be sent packing, the corrupt ones within the PPP or within the Guyana police force and so forth and so on. And instead of waiting for the U.S. to act by revocation of visas and so forth, the PPP regime doesn't act at all. They have never acted on May Toussaint when she was pulled in and questioned. She returned to Guyana and she was sent right back as the permanent secretary until a reshuffle. She was recently sent yesterday, I believe. Immediately she was sent packing. But the same energy the PPP used to send May Toussaint packing, send her home, for now, they didn't do that with Nigel Dharamlal. Serious allegations of rape. The first time around, there had to be a public outcry before they sent him home. Why? Ask yourselves, why? And there are folks who are of the view that Mohammed and the Mohammed family, that is, oh, because of politics, there might be all sort of Jim Cock bring Ramgold story. This investigation is over 4 years old that we know of. There are prior investigations. And so we have got to a point where sanctions reached a point that they had to have had the sanctions against them. That is according to the law enforcement agencies. Not one agency investigated them. Many law enforcement agencies in the United States of America. And when they investigate, when they make a presentation for any company or an individual to be sanctioned, it cannot be on circumstantial evidence. It simply means that they have solid, and I do mean solid evidence against the Mohammeds. Solid evidence against May Toussaint. As many of you recall, they confiscated her phone, they did whatever, and they sent it back. They did whatever, and they sent it back. Not so long ago, just a few months, we heard a senior police officer was pulled in for fitness. And for some of you who are not Guyanese, you may ask what pulled in for fitness really means. That they were questioned, they were pulled over at the airport, they were questioned. We're hearing that there are other senior government officials who were pulled in and they were questioned by law enforcement officers at the airport. We're also hearing that some folks who visited the U.S. with Irfan Ali, of course, you guys know that trip when they made that trip to Brooklyn, several of those persons who accompanied Irfan Ali to the U.S. were also pulled in and questioned for a long period of time. Of course, we know the names of those individuals. They know who they are. And so, we're in the habit of just giving you guys a little hint. And so lots and lots of persons in the PPP regime are afraid to travel because they don't know what's going to happen. They don't know when they are going to be pulled over for fitness, to be questioned for over an hour, 2 hours, and possibly arrested once they come to the United States of America. The PPP and their cohorts, they love to say, come to certain folks, come to Guyana. Well, here in the reverse, we are saying to those officials of the PPP regime, come to the United States of America. To some of you corrupt businessmen disguised as private sector commission members and all these things, come to the United States of America. And to the corrupt police officers, come to the United States of America. Why do you suppose they're hardly coming? Some of them, we know who they are hardly coming to the United States of America. Simply put, they are all afraid. They're afraid of even their own shadow. Karma is a bee. You know that. Karma is indeed a bee. And moon, as we say in Guyana, moon a run till they catch 'em. Moon a run till they catch 'em. Come on, Jack Dave. Come to the United States of America. All of you, come to the United States of America. And don't think that you guys can bluff anybody about extradition. Don't think so at all. It will very well come back to work against all of you in the PPP regime. But for now, my name is Mark Benchop. See you guys tomorrow, same place, same time, right here on 107.1 FM. Thanks to Tom Anderson and Bart Fisher. We thank them all. And you got to say a little prayers because once these ships hit over into Venezuela, we might see some provocations. Some of Venezuelan jets flying over into Guyana's borders. Be careful. Watch it. Watch it, guys. This is not just for show or optics or pictures and so forth. This is serious development. And it is so sad that we have a corrupt and racist regime right now. So sad. In 2020, the regime change turned out to be a curse to all of Guyana. And it turned out to be an embarrassment to all those who participated in that regime change. Many of them, I am sure, have regrets right now. Again, next elections, it's time for another regime change. I'm out of here. Enough said. So long.
Yeah, my name is Jasmine Caldata from Sicily, Vietnam, and since 1965 I become a voter, and I always place my ex next to the cup, and what they are doing today, I can't take it. So I have no more vote to give to PPP anymore. I'm not going to vote anymore no more. If they have to lose by one vote, they're losing it by data. I have none.
Take warning, you better take warning. Take warning, you better do good. Let your light shine bright, let your light shine right. Respect your fellow man as you should. Take warning, you better take warning. Take warning, you better do good. Let your light shine bright, let your light shine right. Respect your fellow man as you should. The evil that men do lives after them. The evil that men do lives after them. Your evil today will blight your tomorrow. So do good today and avoid your sorrow. Take warning, you better take warning. Take warning, you better do good. Let your light shine bright, let your light shine right. Respect your fellow man as you should. Take warning, you better take warning. Take warning, you better do good. Let your light shine bright, let your light shine right. Respect your fellow man as you should. The evil that men do lives after them. The evil that men do lives after them. Your evil today will blight your tomorrow. So do good today and avoid your sorrow.
Take the message, everybody.
Take warning, you better take warning. Take warning, you better do good. Let your light shine bright, let your light shine right. Respect your fellow man as you should. Take warning, take warning.
Jesus Christ, if cost of living double, I don't know what happened. A pound of sugar is $300 already. flour, everything gone up. Everything just raising. You gotta get about $40,000 for buy good ration. You gotta get 3 man now. A weekend man, a monthly man, and a fortnight man.
How we gonna do a body man walk right now? You ready? Box, let me go now. Hear me sing now. Body walk, body walk, body walk, everything. Body walk, truck, body walk, body walk, body walk, everything. Body, listen. Body jump, body jump, body jump, everything. Body jump, body jump, body jump, body jump, everything. Hear me sing, so big body down wearing tight pants, big body jump.
Hey fans, it's karaoke and oldies night this and every Thursday at Club Twilight Sideline Dam, Buxton. Dance to the magical songs of yesteryear by popular DJs and Camps Audio. Admission is free. Come out, let's make memories at Club Twilight Sideline Dam, Buxton North.